My name is Felicia and I am 30 years old. Life was supposed to be beautiful as I awaited the birth of my first child with my husband Aaron. I never imagined my mother-in-law Margaret would turn my world upside down with 3 devastating words. The memory still haunts me. Standing on her porch 7 months pregnant, hearing her scream, "Get out!" as the cold air wrapped around me. But what happened after that moment changed everything in ways nobody could have predicted. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever dealt with difficult in-laws or family drama. Yes. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, surrounded by open fields and friendly neighbors who knew each other by name. My childhood was simple but happy. My parents raised me to be independent and compassionate values that led me to pursue nursing as a career. I wanted to help people during their most vulnerable moments to be a source of comfort and healing. After nursing school, I moved to Minneapolis for better job opportunities. The city life was an adjustment, but I quickly fell in love with the energy and diversity. I secured a position at Riverside Memorial Hospital in the labor and delivery unit. The work was demanding but incredibly rewarding. Every day I witnessed new life entering the world, families being formed and expanded. Little did I know that my own love story would begin in those same hospital halls. I met Aaron during a particularly hectic night shift. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative who had come in to discuss new pain management options with our department head. We literally bumped into each other at the coffee machine in the break room. I was exhausted after helping deliver twins, and he was waiting for his appointment. When our coffee cups collided, creating a brown puddle on the floor, we both laughed instead of getting upset. That shared moment of humanity amid chaos sparked something between us. Aaron asked for my number that same day, and we went on our first date the following weekend. He was charming, intelligent, and attentive. Unlike other men I had dated, he genuinely listened when I spoke about my day or my dreams for the future. Our connection felt effortless, like we had known each other for years instead of weeks. The relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, we were practically living together. After a year, during a weekend trip to Lake Superior, Aaron proposed on a scenic cliff overlooking the water at sunset. It was like something out of a movie, and I said yes without hesitation. We were married 4 months later in a beautiful spring ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. That was when I first met Margaret, Aaron's mother. During our courtship, she had been traveling extensively through Europe, something she had always wanted to do after Aaron's father left years earlier. Aaron spoke of her often always with admiration and love. He described her as his rock, the person who had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities in life after his father abandoned them. I was nervous, but excited to meet this woman who had raised such a wonderful man. At first, Margaret seemed to live up to her reputation. She was elegant, well-spoken, and welcomed me with what appeared to be genuine warmth. She helped with wedding preparations, offering suggestions rather than demands. She even gifted me a vintage pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, saying I was the daughter she never had. I was touched and relieved that we seemed to be forming a positive relationship. The wedding day itself was magical. Everything went according to plan, from the flower arrangements to the weather cooperating for our outdoor ceremony. It was only during the reception that I noticed something slightly off about Margaret. During the mother-son dance, she held Aaron a bit too tightly, whispering in his ear throughout the entire song. When it was time for him to return to me, she seemed reluctant to let go her smile, not quite reaching her eyes as she watched us together. I dismissed it as normal emotional behavior for a mother on her only son's wedding day. After all, they had been a team of 2 for most of Aaron's life. It was natural for her to feel some adjustment to this new dynamic. Our first year of marriage was blissful. Aaron and I settled into a comfortable routine, both advancing in our careers while making time for each other and our shared interests. We bought a small but charming starter home that needed some work, spending weekends painting and renovating together. Margaret visited occasionally, always bringing elaborate meals and household gifts. She would sometimes rearrange our furniture or reorganize the kitchen while I was at work, but Aaron assured me it was just her way of helping. Around our first anniversary, we decided it was time to start a family. We both wanted children, and I was approaching 30. The timing felt right. We spent several months tracking ovulation cycles and optimizing our chances. When I finally saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, I was overjoyed. Aaron cried when I told him immediately, placing his hand on my still flat stomach and talking to our tiny embryo. We shared the news with close family members after the first trimester, once the risk of miscarriage had decreased. My parents were ecstatic about becoming grandparents for the first time. My sister Lauren immediately started planning a baby shower. Aaron's colleagues sent congratulatory messages and gifts. Margaret's reaction was enthusiastic, perhaps too much so. She showed up at our house unannounced the day after Aaron called her with the news. She brought bags full of baby clothes, all in neutral colours, since we did not yet know the gender. She talked rapidly about her plans to help after the birth, suggesting she could move in temporarily to show me how to properly care for a newborn. While her excitement was understandable, something about her presumptiveness made me uneasy. This was only the beginning of what would become a pattern of boundary-crossing behaviour. Still, I remained hopeful. This baby would bring our families closer together, I thought. Margaret would be a loving grandmother, and any tension between us would dissolve in the face of this new life we were creating. I could not have been more wrong. The shift in Margaret's behaviour was subtle at first, easy to dismiss as grandmotherly enthusiasm. During my 4th month of pregnancy, she started calling daily to check on my symptoms and diet. Her questions seemed innocent enough. What was I eating? Was I taking the right prenatal vitamins? Had I experienced any spotting or unusual pain? But her tone carried judgment, especially when my answers did not align with her expectations. You are eating salads with raw vegetables. When I was pregnant with Aaron, my doctor strictly forbade anything raw. Too many bacteria risks for the baby, she would say, despite my explanations about modern prenatal nutrition guidelines. She began attending my doctor appointments initially at Aaron's suggestion, since he often could not take time off work. I appreciated the support, but Margaret would dominate these visits, answering questions before I could, and presenting herself as an authority on my pregnancy. Doctor, we have been monitoring her swelling, and I noticed her ankles were particularly puffy yesterday. Should we be concerned about preeclampsia? She would ask, speaking about me as if I were not in the room. The real trouble began when we started preparing the nursery. Aaron and I had chosen a woodland theme with soft greens and browns gender neutral since we wanted to be surprised at birth. We spent a weekend painting and assembling furniture, creating the perfect space for our baby. The following Tuesday, I came home from work to find Margaret in our nursery, directing 2 delivery men as they brought in a white crib with ornate detailing, nothing like the simple modern one we had purchased. Margaret, what is happening? We already have a crib, I said, confused and irritated. Oh, Felicia, this is a much better quality crib. The one you chose looks like it came from a discount store. My grandchild deserves the best, she replied, patting my arm condescendingly. Besides, this matches the rocking chair and changing table I ordered. They will be delivered next week. I stood there speechless as she continued directing the placement of this unwanted furniture. When I finally found my voice and told her we preferred our original choices, she looked hurt. I am just trying to help. You and Aaron are so busy with work. Consider this my contribution as co-parent. Co-parent. That word struck me like a physical blow. When I recounted the incident to Aaron that evening, expecting his support, he merely shrugged. Mom is just excited, Felicia. She has good taste and means well. Can we not just accept her gifts? It makes her happy to be involved. This response became his standard reaction to any complaints about his mother. She was just being helpful. She was showing love in her own way. I was being overly sensitive due to pregnancy hormones. The dismissals hurt more than Margaret's behaviour because they made me question my own perceptions. At a family gathering to celebrate Aaron's birthday when I was 5 months along, Margaret announced to everyone that she would be taking a leave of absence from her part-time job at the library to help care for our baby in the first few months. Several relatives congratulated her on her dedication, while I sat stunned by this unilateral decision about my child's care. When I privately expressed my discomfort to Aaron, suggesting we needed to establish boundaries with his mother, he became defensive. My mum raised me alone after Dad left. She knows what she's doing. Why are you trying to exclude her? This is her grandchild too. Around my 6th month of pregnancy, complications arose. My blood pressure began to rise and my doctor recommended reducing my work hours. This cut into our income significantly, creating financial strain just when we needed to be saving for my upcoming maternity leave. Aaron picked up extra sales calls to compensate, which meant longer hours and more travel. During this stressful period, Margaret made what seemed like a generous offer. She owned a large 4-bedroom house with plenty of space, and she suggested we move in temporarily to save money and have help during the final stages of my pregnancy. Aaron thought it was the perfect solution. I was hesitant, but agreed primarily for financial reasons. We would keep our house, but rent it out for 6 months to a year while we stayed with Margaret. The move happened quickly, too quickly. Within 2 weeks, our belongings were either in storage or integrated into Margaret's home. She had cleared out her home office for the nursery, but insisted on decorating it herself since she knew the house better. My carefully chosen nursery items mysteriously did not fit the space, or clashed with the existing decor, according to Margaret. As the weeks passed, I became increasingly uncomfortable. Margaret had opinions about everything from my maternity clothes to my birth plan. She advocated strongly for scheduled C-section delivery because natural childbirth is unnecessarily traumatic for the baby, despite my desire for a non-medicated birth if possible. She criticised my intention to breastfeed exclusively, citing how formula had worked perfectly well for Aaron, and suggesting I was being influenced by trendy mummy blogs rather than practical wisdom. When I mentioned cloth diaper options, she laughed outright, telling Aaron later that I clearly had no idea how much work a newborn required. With Aaron working longer hours, I found myself alone with Margaret most days. She monitored my food intake, commenting if I had a small dessert or an extra serving at dinner. She rearranged the baby clothes I had washed and organised, claiming her system made more sense. She answered the phone when my friends called and sometimes forgot to relay messages. I began to feel like a guest in her home, rather than a family member, despite Aaron's insistence that we were all one family now. My space, my privacy, and my autonomy were gradually being eroded, one small boundary violation at a time. And the person who should have been my strongest advocate was blind to it all. By my 7th month, I felt trapped in a situation that was deteriorating daily. Margaret's interference had evolved from annoying to alarming. She no longer waited for invitations to my prenatal appointments, but assumed her presence was required. During one particularly uncomfortable visit, she spoke over me so consistently that my obstetrician, Dr. Carter, finally intervened. "Margaret, I appreciate your concern, but I need to hear directly from Felicia about her symptoms," Dr. Carter said firmly, directing her attention to me. Before I could speak, Margaret jumped in again. "Felicia has been quite forgetful lately. Pregnancy brain, you know. She forgot to mention the swelling in her hands and feet, and she has been having headaches she has not told you about." While I had experienced mild swelling typical for the 3rd trimester, Margaret had exaggerated the symptoms significantly. Dr. Carter looked at me questioningly, and I felt caught between contradicting my mother-in-law and being honest with my doctor. "I have had some normal swelling and occasional headaches, but nothing severe," I clarified, feeling Margaret's disapproving stare. On the drive home, Margaret lectured me about taking my condition more seriously. "You are putting my grandchild at risk by downplaying your symptoms. I raised a child successfully, Felicia. You have never done this before." This exchange set the pattern for increasingly controlling behaviour. Margaret began commenting regularly on my weight gain, despite the fact that my doctor was pleased with my progress. "When I was pregnant with Aaron, I only gained 20 pounds total," she would say, while watching me eat breakfast. "You have already gained almost 30 and you still have 2 months to go. It will be so hard to lose that weight afterward." These comments stung especially as my changing body already made me feel vulnerable. I tried to focus on my baby's health rather than arbitrary weight standards, but Margaret's constant remarks eroded my confidence. The situation worsened when I discovered Margaret had been discussing my pregnancy with extended family members in concerning ways. Aaron's cousin Julia called one evening specifically to check on me. "Margaret mentioned you have been emotionally unstable lately," Julia said hesitantly. "She said the doctor is worried about your mental health affecting the baby. I wanted to see if you needed any support." I was shocked. My emotional health had never been raised as a concern by any medical professional. Margaret had fabricated issues to paint me as an unfit mother before the baby even arrived. When I confronted her, she claimed she was simply asking family to pray for my well-being during a difficult pregnancy. The most painful discovery came when I overheard Margaret speaking to Aaron in the kitchen one evening while I rested upstairs. Thinking I was asleep, she spoke freely. "I am concerned about Felicia's ability to handle motherhood, Aaron. She seems overwhelmed already, and the baby is not even here yet. Remember your cousin David's wife? She had that terrible postpartum depression and could barely care for their baby. I see similar signs in Felicia." Aaron's response crushed me. "I have noticed she seems more emotional and less capable lately. Do you think we should talk to her doctor privately?" My own husband was conspiring with his mother to pathologize my normal pregnancy experiences. The betrayal cut deep. I retreated to our bedroom before they could discover I had overheard them crying silently into my pillow. As my pregnancy progressed, Aaron became increasingly critical of me, clearly influenced by his mother's perspective. He questioned my decisions about everything from prenatal vitamins to baby clothes. The supportive partner who had been so excited about our future together was transforming into another source of judgment and stress. One Saturday afternoon, I went shopping with my sister Lauren and returned to find the nursery rearranged. The organic cotton crib sheets I had purchased were gone, replaced with synthetic ones Margaret preferred. The noise machine and monitor I had researched extensively had been swapped for brands Margaret trusted. When I asked about my missing items, Margaret claimed they were in storage, for now, since her choices were safer. The invasion of privacy extended to my personal space as well. I noticed my cosmetics and toiletries rearranged in the bathroom drawers in the guest room where we slept had been sorted through, and even my pregnancy journal seemed to have been moved from where I last left it. The final straw came when I discovered Margaret had accidentally deleted dozens of pregnancy photos from my phone while helping me create space for more pictures. These included irreplaceable images from our gender reveal party and special moments Aaron and I had documented throughout the pregnancy. When I became upset, Margaret dismissed my reaction as pregnancy hormones and suggested I was becoming too attached to trivial things. I felt increasingly isolated as Aaron worked longer hours and spent his free time helping his mother with house projects rather than connecting with me. My calls to friends dwindled as Margaret's monitoring made private conversations nearly impossible. I found myself retreating both physically and emotionally, spending more time in our bedroom to avoid confrontations that left me feeling gaslit and alone. In desperation, I called my sister Lauren, whispering into the phone from the bathroom with the shower running to ensure familiar privacy. I shared the ongoing situation, breaking down as I admitted how unhappy and trapped I felt. "This sounds serious, Felicia," Lauren said, concern evident in her voice. "I am coming to visit this weekend. I need to see what is happening firsthand." Lauren's visit provided temporary relief, but ultimately escalated tensions. Margaret was coldly polite at first, but when Lauren questioned why my belongings were stored in the garage rather than the nursery, an argument erupted. Margaret accused Lauren of interfering in family matters, while Lauren pointed out that I was being systematically sidelined in decisions about my own child. "Felicia needs to understand that this baby is part of our family legacy," Margaret declared. "Aaron was raised a certain way, and his child will be too." "This is Felicia's baby too," Lauren countered. "She has equal say in how her child is raised." The confrontation ended with Margaret asking Lauren to leave, claiming her negative energy was harmful to a peaceful household. Aaron, arriving home midway through the argument, sided with his mother and suggested Lauren's visit had been ill-timed, given everyone's stress levels. After Lauren left, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense. Margaret was openly hostile, making passive-aggressive comments about outside influences and modern women who think they know everything about motherhood from reading internet articles. As I entered my 7th month, the physical discomfort of late pregnancy, combined with the psychological strain of living under Margaret's thumb, left me exhausted and deeply anxious about the future. I felt like a stranger in what was supposed to be my family, with my role as mother already being usurped before my baby even arrived. The day everything fell apart started like most others in Margaret's house. I woke up feeling particularly uncomfortable with lower back pain and slight cramping that my doctor had assured me were normal Braxton Hicks contractions. Aaron had left early for a sales conference 2 hours away, promising to be back by dinner time. I was alone with Margaret, as had become routine. That afternoon, Margaret informed me she would be hosting her weekly church group for tea and Bible study. Normally, I made myself scarce during these gatherings, retreating to our bedroom to avoid the scrutinizing gazes of Margaret's friends, many of whom had clearly formed opinions about me based on whatever Margaret had told them. "You should join us today, Felicia," Margaret suggested, though her tone made it clear this was more command than invitation. "The ladies have been praying for you and the baby. They would love to see how you are progressing." "Thank you, but I am not feeling well today," I replied honestly. "I think I need to lie down and rest." Margaret's lips tightened in disapproval. "Pregnancy is not an illness, Felicia. My mother worked in the fields until the day before she delivered all 4 of her children. A little socialization would do you good." Rather than argue, I nodded and retreated to our room, promising to come down later if I felt better. I lay on the bed trying to find a comfortable position as the baby kicked and shifted inside me. My back pain was intensifying, and I considered calling Dr. Carter, but decided to wait and see if rest would help. I reached for my pregnancy journal, wanting to document these new sensations, but could not find it in its usual spot on the nightstand. After searching the bedroom thoroughly, a sinking feeling led me to check Margaret's room, something I had never done before. The invasion of privacy felt wrong, but my suspicion was stronger than my discomfort. Sure enough, in Margaret's bedside drawer, I found my journal open to recent entries, where I had expressed frustration about living in her home and concerns about her interference. I felt violated and angry. This journal contained my most private thoughts, hopes and fears about pregnancy and motherhood. Margaret had no right to read it, let alone take it from my room. With the journal clutched in my hand, I made my way downstairs, forgetting about the church group in my distress. I entered the living room to find Margaret and 6 older women from her church seated around the coffee table. They fell silent as I appeared, several exchanging glances that confirmed my suspicion that I had been a topic of conversation. "Felicia, how lovely of you to join us," Margaret said with artificial sweetness. "Ladies does not." She looked radiant, though perhaps a bit flushed at the moment. "Margaret, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Anything you need to say can be shared with my friends," Margaret replied dismissively. "We have no secrets in this house." That statement, so blatantly hypocritical given what I had just discovered, broke something in me. I held up the journal. "Then you would not mind me telling everyone that I found this in your bedroom drawer, my private journal that you had no permission to read." The room went silent. Margaret's friends looked uncomfortable, while Margaret herself seemed frozen for a moment before her expression hardened. "Ladies, would you excuse us? It seems my daughter-in-law is having one of her episodes." The women gathered their belongings quickly, making awkward excuses as they hurried out. Once they were gone, Margaret turned to me, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you embarrass me in front of my friends, after everything I have done for you and Aaron? Opening my home, preparing for my grandchild, guiding you through a pregnancy you are clearly unprepared for." "You read my private journal, Margaret," I responded, my voice shaking. "You invaded my privacy in the most personal way possible." "I needed to know what you were telling your doctor," she shouted, abandoning all pretense. "You have been undermining me at every turn, rejecting my advice, turning Aaron against his own mother. Turning Aaron against you. Are you serious? You have been trying to control every aspect of this pregnancy, making decisions about my baby without consulting me, criticizing everything I do." The argument escalated rapidly. Margaret's carefully maintained facade crumbled, revealing the resentment and jealousy that had been building since Aaron and I announced our pregnancy. "You think you can just come into our lives and take over," she spat. "Aaron and I were perfectly happy before you. He trusted my guidance, valued my opinion. Now you have filled his head with all these modern ideas about parenting and family. Aaron is my husband, Margaret. We are starting our own family. That is normal and healthy. You do not deserve him," she shouted, her voice rising to a pitch I had never heard before. "You trapped him with this pregnancy. I see right through you. You will never be good enough for my son or capable enough to raise my grandchild properly." I stood there stunned by the venom in her words, one hand protectively covering my stomach, where the baby had begun kicking vigorously, perhaps responding to my elevated heart rate and stress hormones. "I think Aaron and I should move back to our house," I said quietly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "This living arrangement is not working." That was when Margaret completely lost control. Her face contorted with rage as she screamed, Get out of my house right now." "Margaret, be reasonable. I cannot just leave. I am 7 months pregnant and Aaron is not even home." "I do not care. Get out, get out." She continued screaming, advancing toward me with such aggression that I instinctively backed away. "This is my house, my son, my grandchild." To my horror, she began physically pushing me toward the front door, her hands on my shoulders, propelling me backward. I tried to resist without pushing back, terrified of falling or hurting the baby. "Stop, you are going to hurt the baby," I cried, but Margaret was beyond reason. She opened the front door and continued forcing me outside onto the porch. The cold October air hit me like a physical shock. I had no coat, no purse, no phone. Margaret disappeared briefly into the house, then returned to throw my purse onto the porch at my feet. "Do not come back until you learn your place in this family," she hissed before slamming the door. I stood there in disbelief, shivering in the thin maternity dress I was wearing. Through the window, I could see Margaret picking up the phone, presumably calling Aaron to give him her version of events. I tried the door handle, but she had locked it. The reality of my situation slowly sank in. I was 7 months pregnant, locked out of the house in the cold with nowhere to go. I could feel my baby moving anxiously within me, and a sharp pain radiated across my lower abdomen, more intense than the earlier contractions. Neighbours across the street were watching from their windows, but made no move to help. I had met them only briefly since moving into Margaret's home, and they were clearly friends of hers, unlikely to take my side. With trembling hands, I dug through my purse for my phone and called Aaron. It went straight to voicemail. I left a desperate message trying to clearly explain what had happened without sounding hysterical, though tears were streaming down my face. Aaron, your mother just physically pushed me out of the house. I am standing on the porch and she locked the door. I am having pains. Please call me back immediately. I waited 5 minutes and called again with the same result. The pain in my abdomen was getting worse, and I was growing increasingly concerned about the baby. Standing in the cold was not only uncomfortable, but potentially dangerous for both of us. After the third failed attempt to reach Aaron, I made the decision to call my sister Lauren instead. Despite living 40 minutes away, she was my best hope for immediate help. Lauren, I need you, I said when she answered, my voice breaking. Margaret kicked me out of the house. I am having pains and I'm scared for the baby. I am on my way, Lauren replied without hesitation. Go to the neighbour's house or find somewhere warm to wait. I cannot. They are all Margaret's friends. No one is helping. Then get in your car if you have your keys. Turn on the heat and wait for me there. I am leaving right now. I found my car keys in my purse and made my way carefully down the porch steps, one hand on the railing, the other supporting my belly. Each step sent waves of pain through my lower back and abdomen. I reached my car, parked in the driveway, and climbed inside, turning on the heat to full blast. As I sat there waiting for Lauren, watching Margaret's silhouette move behind the curtains, I felt a profound sense of abandonment and betrayal. Not just from Margaret, whose true feelings were now devastatingly clear, but from Aaron, who had left me vulnerable to his mother's escalating behaviour. And from the neighbours who witnessed a pregnant woman in distress and chose to look the other way. The contractions were coming more regularly now, approximately 15 minutes apart. I knew enough from my nursing background to recognise these were not normal Braxton Hicks contractions. The stress and physical confrontation had potentially triggered preterm labour. As I waited for Lauren, I focused on slow, deep breathing, trying to calm myself for my baby's sake, while praying that these contractions would subside. Lauren arrived in record time, her tyres screeching as she pulled into the driveway behind my car. One look at my pale, tear-stained face through the window, and she was immediately opening my door, helping me into her vehicle. You are having contraction, she stated, rather than asked, yeah, noticing how I winced and grabbed my stomach. About 10 minutes apart now, I confirmed my nursing knowledge, doing little to calm my fears. It is too early, Lauren. I am only 30 weeks. We are going straight to the hospital, she decided, pulling away from Margaret's house with one last glare at the front door, which remained firmly closed despite the commotion in the driveway. During the drive, I tried Aaron again, leaving another voicemail explaining that I was heading to the hospital with possible preterm labour. The contractions intensified, coming closer together as we navigated through evening traffic toward Riverside Memorial, where I worked in the labour and delivery unit. The familiarity of the hospital brought little comfort. As I was wheeled into triage, my colleagues now caring for me as a patient rather than working alongside me. Dr. Carter was called in, her face grave as she examined me. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, Felicia, she informed me after reviewing the initial assessments. And the baby's heart rate is showing some concerning patterns with each contraction. We need to stop this labour if possible. Yes, dear. I was admitted immediately and placed on continuous monitoring. Medication was administered to try to halt the contractions and steroids to help mature the baby's lungs in case an early delivery became necessary. Through it all, Lauren remained by my side, advocating fiercely when hospital staff she did not recognise questioned the urgency of my situation. My sister was physically forced out of her home while 7 months pregnant. Lauren informed a young resident who suggested my symptoms might be anxiety-related. This is not a psychological issue. This is a medical emergency caused by abuse. 4 hours after my admission, Aaron finally appeared in the doorway of my hospital room. His face was drawn with concern, but there was also confusion and doubt in his eyes that told me he had spoken with his mother. Felicia, what happened? Mom said you had some kind of breakdown, accused her of invading your privacy, and stormed out of the house. Lauren immediately stood from her chair beside my bed, positioning herself between Aaron and me like a protective shield. Are you kidding me right now? She demanded. Your mother physically pushed your pregnant wife out of the house. Felicia is in preterm labor because of the stress and trauma your mother caused. Aaron looked from Lauren to me, uncertainty clear in his expression. Mom said Felicia misunderstood her suggestion to get some fresh air. She never meant for her to leave the house entirely. The monitoring equipment beeped loudly as my heart rate spiked in response to his words. A nurse hurried in to check the readouts, giving Aaron a stern look. Sir, whatever you are discussing is causing distress to the patient. I need to ask you to either change the subject or step outside until she stabilizes. Aaron had the decency to look ashamed. He moved closer to the bed once the nurse left, taking my hand cautiously. I am sorry, Felicia. I should have been there. But you know how Mum can exaggerate sometimes when she is upset. I am sure she did not mean to actually kick you out. She screamed, "Get out," repeatedly while physically pushing me through the door. I replied, my voice weak but determined. She locked the door behind me and threw my purse at my feet. There was no misunderstanding. Aaron ran a hand through his hair, his internal conflict visible. That does not sound like my mother. She can be overprotective and opinionated, but she would never put the baby at risk. She called me just before I arrived, Lauren interjected. I told her Felicia was in the hospital with preterm labor. Do you know what she said? Felicia has always been dramatic. She is probably faking contractions for attention. Your mother knew exactly what she was doing. The look of disbelief on Aaron's face might have been comical in any other circumstance. He seemed genuinely unable to reconcile the loving mother he knew with the woman we were describing. There must be an explanation, he insisted. Maybe Mum felt threatened or provoked somehow. That suggestion that I might have deserved such treatment was the final betrayal. I felt something break inside me, not physically, but emotionally, as I realized the man I married was fundamentally incapable of seeing his mother's behavior clearly. Aaron, I said quietly, I found my private pregnancy journal in your mother's bedside drawer. She had been reading it without my permission. When I confronted her, she became enraged and violent. Those are the facts. If you cannot accept that, then we have a serious problem beyond your mother's behavior. Before Aaron could respond, the monitors began alarming again. This time it was the baby's heart rate dropping significantly during a particularly strong contraction. Dr. Carter rushed in with several nurses quickly assessing the situation. The baby is showing signs of distress, she announced. Felicia, we need to administer additional medication and possibly prepare for an emergency delivery if things do not stabilize. Aaron was ushered out of the room along with Lauren as the medical team worked to address the crisis. The next few hours passed in a blur of interventions, medications, and constant monitoring. By morning, the contractions had finally subsided and the baby's heart rate had stabilized, but Dr. Carter's prognosis was sobering. You need complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy, Felicia, she advised. No work, no stress, minimal physical activity. The placenta is showing signs of insufficient blood flow, likely due to your elevated blood pressure. Any additional stress could trigger labor again, with potentially serious consequences for the baby. When Aaron was allowed back into the room, he seemed subdued, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. Dr. Carter explained how serious this is, he said, sitting beside the bed. I am so sorry, Felicia. I should have been there. I wanted to accept his apology to believe that this crisis had opened his eyes to his mother's manipulative behavior. But his next words shattered that hope. I need to go talk to Mom, sort this all out. There must be a way to fix things between you two. We cannot raise this baby with this kind of conflict. Aaron, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, I cannot and will not return to your mother's house. Not after what happened. Where will you go? He asked, genuinely perplexed. Our house is rented out for another 4 months and you need someone to care for you on bed rest. I will stay with Felicia at my apartment, Lauren interjected from the doorway, having returned with coffee. Unlike some people, I will actually protect her and the baby. Aaron looked wounded by the implication, but did not argue. Let me talk to Mum first. Maybe once everyone calms down, we can work something out. He left shortly after, promising to return later. Lauren and I exchanged glances, both recognizing that Aaron was still hoping for a magical resolution that would not require him to choose between his wife and his mother. Later that afternoon, as I dozed fitfully in the hospital bed, there was a soft knock at the door. A woman I vaguely recognized entered, looking nervous. Felicia, I am Susan Jenkins, Margaret's neighbor from across the street. I saw what happened yesterday. Lauren immediately went on alert. Are you here on Margaret's behalf? Susan shook her head firmly. No, absolutely not. I am here because I witnessed everything from my living room window. I saw Margaret physically pushing Felicia out the door. I heard her screaming. and I am ashamed that I did not intervene immediately. She approached the bed, genuine regret in her eyes. I have known Margaret for 15 years. This is not the first time I have seen her behave this way towards someone Aaron cares about. Before you, there was a girlfriend in college. Margaret did almost the exact same thing, finding fault with everything the poor girl did until she eventually engineered a breakup. This revelation that Margaret had a history of such behavior was both validating and disturbing. Susan continued pulling a business card from her purse. I used to be a social worker before retirement. What Margaret did constitutes abuse, especially given your pregnant condition. If you need a witness for any legal proceedings, I am willing to provide a statement. No one should be treated that way, especially not a woman carrying a child. The offer of support from this unexpected quarter brought fresh tears to my eyes. For months I had doubted my own perceptions, wondering if I was indeed being overly sensitive or demanding. Susan's validation was like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in gaslighting and manipulation. As Susan left, promising to check on me again, I realized that this crisis had forced a crossroads in my marriage. The choices Aaron made in the coming days would determine not just our relationship, but the environment in which our child would be raised. And for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of strength, returning a determination to protect myself and my baby, regardless of Aaron's decisions. No, the hospital discharged me after 3 days of monitoring, once the doctors were confident the contractions had completely stopped and my condition had stabilized. Lauren had prepared her one-bedroom apartment for my arrival, converting her living room into a comfortable bed rest sanctuary, with a rented hospital bedside tables within easy reach, and a television positioned perfectly for long days of limited mobility. "It is not the nursery we planned," she apologized as she helped me settle in, "but it is safe." That word safe resonated deeply. Safety had become my primary concern, not just physically, but emotionally. The trauma of being expelled from Margaret's house had left me with recurring nightmares and anxiety that Dr. Carter warned could impact the baby if not managed. Aaron visited daily at first, bringing flowers and baby items, seemingly trying to maintain normalcy. He reported having productive conversations with his mother, though the details remained vague. Margaret had apparently acknowledged that her reaction was perhaps excessive, but maintained that I had provoked her by invading her privacy and embarrassing her in front of her friends. "She is willing to apologize if you will also apologize," Aaron suggested, during one visit, his hopeful expression suggesting he thought this was a reasonable compromise. "Apologize for what exactly?" I asked. "For finding my own journal in her drawer, for expecting basic respect in the home where I was living." Aaron shifted uncomfortably. "She feels you have been ungrateful for everything she has done. The nursery preparations, the baby clothes, her advice about pregnancy. Aaron, your mother kicked me out while I was 7 months pregnant. I ended up in the hospital with preterm labor. Our baby could have been born dangerously early because of her actions. Do you understand that?" "Of course I do," he insisted. "But Mom is family too. We need to find a way forward that includes everyone." His continued inability to recognize the severity of the situation was eye-opening. Aaron was so deeply enmeshed in his mother's worldview that even this crisis had not fully broken her hold on him. I realized then that protecting my child might mean making difficult decisions about my marriage as well. During the second week of bed rest, I contacted a family law attorney recommended by one of the nurses at the hospital. The initial consultation was conducted via video call with Lauren present for support. The attorney Diane Mendez listened carefully to my account of events, her expression grave. "What you have described is domestic abuse," she stated plainly. "The fact that it came from your mother-in-law rather than your husband does not change that classification. You have the right to feel safe in your home, and you have the right to protect your unborn child from a volatile environment." She outlined my legal options, including a restraining order against Margaret, potential separation from Aaron if he continued to enable his mother's behavior, and ensuring access to our marital home, which was legally half mine, despite the current rental situation. "I do not want to end my marriage," I admitted. "I still love Aaron, and I want our child to have a father." "Sometimes the best way to save a marriage is to establish clear boundaries," Diane advised. "Right now, Aaron believes he can have everything his way with no real consequences for his mother's actions. That dynamic needs to change for any healthy relationship to survive." With Diane's guidance, I began documenting everything from the original incident to Aaron's responses and any communication with Margaret. Lauren helped me retrieve essential items from Margaret's house, coordinating with Aaron to enter when Margaret was at her weekly hair appointment. Many of my belongings had been damaged or were missing entirely. My maternity clothes had been boxed and stored in the garage, where several boxes showed water damage. Family heirlooms I had brought, including my grandmother's silver picture frame and jewelry box, were nowhere to be found. My important documents, including my birth certificate and passport, had also mysteriously disappeared. Mom probably just organized them somewhere safe, Aaron suggested when questioned. She likes to keep important papers in her filing cabinet. But a search of the filing cabinet yielded nothing, and Margaret claimed no knowledge of the missing items when she returned home unexpectedly during our retrieval mission. Her cold stare as she watched us packing my remaining possessions spoke volumes about her true feelings. As word spread among my colleagues at the hospital, an unexpected support system emerged. Nurses and doctors I had worked with for years organised meal deliveries, sent baby gifts, and offered their professional services for free or reduced costs. One colleague's husband, a contractor, volunteered to prepare our house for our return once the rental agreement ended, ensuring it would be ready for a newborn. Even Susan, Margaret's neighbour, continued to check in regularly, bringing homemade soups and providing updates on Margaret's version of events being spread throughout the neighbourhood. According to Susan, Margaret had crafted a narrative portraying herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter-in-law who had mental health issues. No one who actually saw what happened believes her, Susan assured me, and I have made sure to correct the record whenever possible. 3 weeks into my bed rest, a truly unexpected ally emerged. Aaron's father, Thomas, whom I had met only twice at family events, contacted me directly. Divorced from Margaret for over 20 years, Thomas had maintained a distant but cordial relationship with Aaron while rebuilding his life in another state. Aaron called me concerned about the situation, Thomas explained during our phone conversation. His version was heavily influenced by Margaret's perspective, but reading between the lines, I recognized the patterns immediately. Thomas shared insights into his marriage to Margaret, describing controlling behaviors and emotional manipulation that mirrored my experiences exactly. He had ultimately left when Aaron was 10 after years of attempting to make the relationship work. I have regretted not fighting harder for custody of Aaron, he admitted. Margaret alienated him from me, convinced him I had abandoned them rather than escaped an unhealthy situation. By the time he was old enough to understand the damage to our relationship was done. This context helped me understand Aaron's blind spot regarding his mother. He had been raised to see her as the long-suffering, self-sacrificing parent who had been wronged by an uncaring father. His entire identity was built around being the loyal son who would never inflict similar pain on his mother. Thomas offered his support in whatever way would be helpful, including testifying about Margaret's history if necessary. His validation from the unique perspective of Margaret's ex-husband provided additional clarity as I navigated my legal options. With my due date approaching and no resolution with Aaron in sight, I made the difficult decision to formalize our separation legally. Diane prepared the paperwork, including a petition for exclusive use of our marital home once the rental period ended and a request for a temporary restraining order against Margaret based on the eviction incident and subsequent harassment through third parties. When served with these documents, Aaron finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. He appeared at Lauren's apartment, unannounced distress evident in every feature. "Felicia, please do not do this," he begged. "We can work things out. Mom has agreed to start therapy. She realizes she overreacted." "Overreacted," I repeated incredulously. "Aaron, she put our baby's life at risk. She has shown no genuine remorse, only concern about her reputation and access to her grandchild. She is still my mother," he said, his voice breaking. "I cannot just cut her out of my life." "I am not asking you to," I clarified. "I am asking you to prioritize the safety and well-being of your wife and child. I am asking you to establish boundaries that protect us from her harmful behavior." Aaron seemed torn, genuinely conflicted between his lifelong role as his mother's protector and his newer responsibilities as a husband and father-to-be. He left without resolving anything, promising to think about everything I had said. The court date for the restraining order hearing was set for the following week. Thanks to Susan's willingness to testify about what she witnessed and Dr. Carter's medical documentation of the consequences, I had a strong case. The judge would determine whether Margaret's behavior constituted a genuine threat requiring legal intervention. As I prepared for this next difficult step, focusing on remaining calm for my baby's sake, I found strength in the community that had rallied around me. Whatever happened with Aaron and Margaret, I was no longer isolated and powerless. I had advocates, witnesses, and my own growing determination to create a safe and healthy environment for the child I would soon meet. 2 days before the scheduled court hearing, my water broke unexpectedly. At 37 weeks, the baby was technically full term, though earlier than my due date. Lauren rushed me to the hospital, calling Aaron on the way. "This is happening faster than my first delivery," the attending nurse commented as she checked my dilation. "You are already at 7 centimeters. This baby wants to meet you today." Lauren stayed by my side, coaching me through increasingly intense contractions while we waited for Aaron to arrive. When he finally appeared in the doorway, his face pale with anxiety, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, love and disappointment intermingled. "I am here," he said simply, moving to take my hand. The labor progressed rapidly after that. Within 3 hours of arriving at the hospital, I was fully dilated and ready to push. Despite the complicated circumstances surrounding the pregnancy, the birth itself was straightforward. After 40 minutes of pushing, our daughter Emma arrived, her indignant cries filling the delivery room. The moment the nurse placed her on my chest, skin to skin, the outside world temporarily ceased to exist. Her tiny fingers splayed against my collarbone, her eyes squinting against the light as she turned instinctively toward my voice. I was overwhelmed with love and protectiveness so intense it took my breath away. Aaron stood beside the bed, tears streaming down his face, as he gently touched Emma's dark hair. "She is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." For that precious hour after birth, we were simply a new family marveling at the miracle we had created. The complications of our relationship faded into the background as we counted fingers and toes, noted the curve of Emma's nose that resembled Aaron's, and watched her latch successfully for her first feeding. Reality intruded abruptly when a commotion erupted in the hallway outside my room. Raised voices, including one I instantly recognized as Margaret's, broke the peaceful atmosphere. "I have every right to see my grandchild," Margaret was shouting. "I am family. You cannot keep me out." Aaron's expression shifted from joy to dismay. He looked at me apologetically. "I did not tell her you were in labor. She must have heard from someone else." Hospital security arrived quickly, responding to the disturbance. I could hear them explaining hospital policy about visitor limitations and respecting patient wishes. Margaret's voice grew more strident. "My son is in there. Ask him if he wants his mother excluded from this important moment." The security guard appeared at the door looking uncomfortable. "Sir, there is a woman claiming to be your mother causing a disruption. She insists on entering. As the patient's husband, you can authorize her visit, but given the circumstances, we wanted to check with you directly." Aaron looked torn, his gaze shifting between me holding our newborn daughter and the door beyond which his mother continued to demand entry. In that moment, I saw him truly seeing the situation clearly for the first time. "There is also the matter of the temporary restraining order we have on file," the security guard added. "According to our records, this visitor is not permitted contact with the patient pending a court hearing." Aaron's eyes widened slightly. He seemed to be processing multiple realizations simultaneously, confronted with the tangible consequences of his mother's behavior and his own indecision. "Please escort my mother from the building," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "Tell her I will speak with her later, but she is not welcome in this room." The security guard nodded and left to deliver the message. The shouting intensified briefly before fading as Margaret was presumably led away from the maternity ward. Aaron turned back to me, his expression a complex mixture of grief, determination, and apology. "I am sorry, Felicia. I should have protected you both from the beginning." While this moment of clarity was welcome, I remained cautious. One decision made in the emotional aftermath of childbirth did not erase months of enabling behavior. Still, it was a start, a first step toward potentially rebuilding what had been broken. The next day, as I prepared to be discharged with Emma, Aaron broached the subject of our living situation. "I contacted our tenants," he said. "They have agreed to terminate the lease early with appropriate compensation. The house will be available next week. I want you and Emma to come home. I will stay with a colleague until you are comfortable having me there too." "And your mother?" I asked the question that would determine everything. "I spoke with her last night." He replied, his expression somber. "It was a difficult conversation. I told her that her behavior toward you was unacceptable and that she would not have unrestricted access to Emma. She did not take it well." "What does that mean exactly?" "She threatened to file for grandparent rights, claimed I was betraying the family, accused you of turning me against her, the usual tactics." But something has changed for me, Felicia. Seeing Emma, seeing what really matters, I cannot allow that kind of toxicity around our daughter. Aaron went on to explain that he had scheduled an appointment with a family therapist, not for reconciliation with Margaret, but to work on his own understanding of healthy boundaries. He had also spoken with his father again, a conversation that had provided additional perspective on Margaret's long-standing patterns. The court hearing for the restraining order proceeded as scheduled, despite Margaret's attorney filing for a postponement. Susan testified eloquently about what she had witnessed, her background as a social worker, lending additional credibility to her account. Dr. Carter provided medical evidence of the physical danger the eviction had posed to both me and the unborn baby. Margaret appeared in a court with a carefully crafted image of the wronged grandmother dressed conservatively, and clutching a small photo album, she attempted to show the judge, claiming it contained evidence of her loving preparations for her grandchild. Her attorney portrayed her as an over-enthusiastic first-time grandmother, whose actions had been misconstrued. The judge, an older woman with decades of family court experience, saw through the performance. She granted the restraining order prohibiting Margaret from coming within 100 yards of me, our home, or Emma, for 6 months, after which the situation would be re-evaluated. Mrs. Harmon, the judge addressed Margaret directly. Grandparenthood is a privilege, not a right. Your actions demonstrated a disturbing disregard for the well-being of both your daughter-in-law and your unborn grandchild. Until you can demonstrate genuine understanding of appropriate boundaries, this court cannot in good conscience allow you unsupervised access to an infant. Margaret's face contorted with rage at the ruling, a momentary glimpse of the true personality behind the cultivated image. As she was led from the courtroom by her attorney, she glared at Aaron, who had testified honestly about the incident and its aftermath. "You will regret this," she hissed loud enough for several people to hear. "She has poisoned you against your own mother." That public display of her true nature proved to be the final confirmation Aaron needed. Outside the courthouse, he stood beside me as I held Emma in her carrier, his posture straight and resolved. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you had gone into labor that night on the porch," he said quietly. "If you had been alone in the cold with no one to help, Emma could have died. You could have died. And it would have been because I failed to protect you both." The weeks following the court ruling were challenging but healing. Aaron and I moved back into our home, initially maintaining separate bedrooms as we navigated couples therapy and rebuilt trust. Margaret made several attempts to circumvent the restraining order, sending gifts for Emma, through friends appearing coincidentally at a restaurant where Aaron was having lunch, and even contacting my workplace, claiming medical emergency. Each violation was documented and reported, strengthening our case for extending the order if necessary. The most difficult test came when Margaret was hospitalized briefly for high blood pressure, sending messages through family members suggesting her condition was life-threatening and she needed to see her son and grandchild one last time. Medical records obtained through the court revealed a minor treatable condition that her doctor confirmed was not critical. Aaron maintained appropriate boundaries throughout these manipulative attempts, participating in therapy both individually and with me. Slowly, our relationship began to heal as he demonstrated consistent prioritization of our family's well-being over his mother's demands. 6 months after Emma's birth, we celebrated her half-birthday with a small gathering of friends and family, including Aaron's father, Thomas, who was building a relationship with his granddaughter. Margaret, still subject to the restraining order, was not present. As we watched Emma attempting to crawl across a blanket in our backyard, Aaron took my hand, his expression serious but hopeful. "I want to renew our vows," he said, "not just as a ceremony, but as a genuine commitment to the family we are building with healthy boundaries and mutual respect. I failed you before Felicia. I want to promise you properly that it will never happen again." The renewal ceremony was planned for Emma's first birthday, symbolizing not just our recommitment to each other, but the completion of a full cycle of healing and growth. In the months leading up to it, I gradually returned to nursing part-time, finding that helping other new mothers through their birth journeys had taken on deeper meaning after my own experiences. More unexpectedly, I found myself creating a support group for others dealing with toxic in-laws and family dynamics. What began as informal conversations with colleagues facing similar struggles evolved into regular meetings where participants shared strategies for establishing boundaries while preserving family relationships where possible. On the anniversary of the day Margaret had screamed, "Get out!" and forced me from her home, I took time to reflect on the journey. The trauma of that experience would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined my future. From that moment of profound vulnerability had emerged unexpected strength, clearer priorities, and a deeper understanding of the family I wanted to create. The crisis had revealed both weakness and resilience in my marriage, forcing necessary growth that might otherwise have taken years to achieve. Aaron had faced his own painful reckoning with his mother's true nature and his role in enabling her behavior. Through therapy and consistent effort, he was becoming the partner and father he truly wanted to be, rather than the obedient son Margaret had programmed him to remain. Emma flourished in the peaceful environment we worked hard to maintain, growing into a curious, joyful child, surrounded by people who respected appropriate boundaries. The restraining order against Margaret was extended after she made additional attempts to circumvent it, though Aaron maintained limited supervised contact on his own terms, always away from our home and Emma. True healing, I discovered, did not require forgiveness in the conventional sense. I did not need to excuse Margaret's actions or pretend they never happened. I needed only to release their power over my present and future choices. The boundaries we established were not about punishment, but protection, creating space for healthy relationships to thrive without the shadow of manipulation and control. As I watched Emma take her first independent steps across our living room floor, Aaron recording the moment with tears of pride in his eyes, I felt profound gratitude for the painful journey that had led us here. What Margaret had intended as an act of rejection had ultimately become the catalyst for building something stronger, healthier, and more beautiful than I could have imagined in those dark moments standing alone on her porch. For anyone facing similar struggles with toxic family dynamics, I want you to know that establishing boundaries is not selfish, it is necessary. Protecting your peace is not cruel, it is essential. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stand firm against behaviors that would harm it, even when that means making painful choices. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle the situation? Please share your experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else feeling alone in their struggle. Remember to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and thank you for listening to my journey from that devastating moment on the porch to the peaceful, joyful life we have created beyond it.